Hey guys, Corey with Camel ADV. For quite a while I've wanted to do a shop series, so basically just hanging out here in the shop, working on stuff. Maybe it is working on a new part, maybe it's bike maintenance, maybe it's whatever the case may be. There's a lot of basic motorcycle stuff that's the work that I do on my own bikes, or if I'm getting girlfriend's bike ready for a ride. Things that I should be doing videos of to put on the website, help you guys. I know that a lot of topics don't have a lot of how-to videos, so I want to do that. The videos will be quick and dirty. Most of the stuff we do is pretty casual for videos, but these will be even more casual. Today I'm getting ready to go for a ride, and I realized that the wheel bearings in my rear wheel are toast, so I'm going to show you how to change wheel bearings. There may not be extra light, I may not have the extra audio, the shop may be a total disaster, but it's important for me to get videos out for you guys. So if I have to stop and do a big shop clean and burn however much time, I'm more likely to just not do it, to just do the work on the bike, not shoot any video. So we're going to, they're just going to be quick and dirty. I don't know what else to say about it. So yeah, we're going to tackle wheel bearings tonight. So you're going to do a wheel change or tire change, and you realize, oh shit, my bearings are toast. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do if you have the parts and a few basic tools. So these are the bearings for this bike, front and rear. There's some extra stuff in here too that I got. So you want to make sure that you have all of this stuff before you need it. You want to have your part numbers sorted out. Buy this stuff and put it on the shelf, put it in a box in the shop so that you have it when you need it. Because Murphy's Law says you're going to go on a ride, it's Friday afternoon at 4:30, the bearing shop closes at 5, and you have a 35-minute drive to get there. So you go to do your tire or whatever, or you just checking your bike over and you give your back wheel a wiggle and you go, oh, my bearings are toast. So if you have them, you can get it done. If you need them, you're probably screwed for the weekend. You're probably not riding. So you can get the part numbers. Of course, this is our T7, so I'm going to put the T7 part numbers for all this stuff in the video description. Whatever bike you have, the changing of bearings is pretty similar on most of the chain drive bikes. Your bearing sizes and seals will be different, but the process to change them is going to be the same. So plan ahead, get brake pads, get air filter, get oil, get fork seals, get all of that stuff ahead of time and put it on the shelf so when you need it, you have it. So this is our Sprocket carrier here. This one is actually fine. It's not crunchy. So when you roll it, you can feel how smooth it is or how rough it is. You can see if there's mud or water in here. If there's rusty colored water coming out, then obviously you need to change it. But because I've got one of them that's crunchy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do all the bearings front and rear, just so that I know they're done and I don't have to worry about it on my trip. So this is the crunchy one here. And it's just really rough, and I can see some kind of rusty discoloration there. I'm going to pull out the cuss drive rubbers. So we've got to knock this bearing out, and we're going to do the one on this side. We're going to change bearings and seals. So I'm going to set this on the ground. This is the seal puller. You don't need to use this. We're going to replace the seals. So you can just use a flat blade screwdriver to get them out. It is definitely easier with a puller though, but it does damage the seals. So if you're going to reuse them, don't use a puller. You're going to have to get creative and pop these out gently. We're going to take a big long punch and we're going to put it down into the hole here. And so we're just getting the chisel on the edge of this bearing here, and then we're going to tap with the hammer on the other side to get this bearing moving out. So you move back and forth when you do it. So you've got the chisel a little bit on this side and then a little bit. So you've got the chisel a little bit on this side and a little bit on that side, or punch I should say, not chisel. And normally I would get a big socket, or I would have this set on two pieces of 2x4. so that the bearing has room to pop out. But I want to be able to show you the bearing sliding out. And that's our toast bearing there. And then we have a crush sleeve in here. This doesn't rotate. Literally, when you put the axle through here, it butts up against all of the inner bearing races and your spacers, so you can tighten the axle. You're not putting any side load on the bearings, so this just keeps everything running nice and straight and true. So you will notice on the end here, this guy's got a flange on it, and this doesn't. So when it's sitting in here, the end that has the flange won't be able to move side to side. And now when we just knock that bearing out, we were moving the chisel from one side to the other, back and forth. So they put the flange on one side but not the other, so that you can get a bearing started. If you had a flange on both sides and this was sitting dead center, you wouldn't be able to get to the inner race of the bearing to smack it with the chisel or the punch. So you want to start with the side that this is going to move back and forth, and you'll be able to tell pretty quick which side it may be. And maybe in that direction, in which case you're going to start with the bearing on the other side. But now with that out, we can take the chisel and knock the other bearing out. And same thing, a little bit side to side. So then we've got, this one's pretty crunchy too. So we've got the second bearing out. So these are sealed bearings, but you can take an awl and you can pop that out, and you can see these are the individual balls in here. So there's 7 in here, and there's a cage that keeps them all equal distance. So you get dirt and grime in here, and these bearings get crunchy, or they get really loose, and you get rust in here, and then it's time to change them. You need to be aware of this because, so the outer section is what's pressed fit into here, and when we take them out, we're hitting this part with the chisel, which puts a lot of side load on the balls and on the races, which isn't good for them at all. So when you're taking the bearings out, it's best if you replace them. There's no way to get out here to the outer race. If you could, and you can smack that one back and forth and get it out without putting all the load on the inner race and side loading all of these balls, then this bearing would be reusable. I have done it in the past. I have reinstalled them, but kind of best practices, once you've taken it out by hitting it around this edge, you're going to want to replace these. So on the T7, all 3 of the bearings on the rear wheel, so in the sprocket carrier and one side of the hub and the other side, all 3 bearings are different sizes, which is a bit abnormal. So obviously make sure you're working with the right bearing. It will become painfully apparent if you're not. So that one is too big. So that's for the sprocket carrier. And the next one up is this guy here. And that's going to go in here. Now, you can take the bearings and put them in the freezer so that they shrink a little bit. You can take a propane torch or MAP gas torch and heat this up so it expands, so you get these guys to drop in nice and easy. Those are options. I don't usually do it unless they're really miserable. This is generally size on size, So that means that there's no clearance. What the outside diameter of the bearing is the same as the inside diameter. So we're going to take the hammer and just tap lightly side to side. Again, I'm hitting the outside race, not the inner. You can get bearing driver tools that drop in, and they're just going to grab the outside edge of this, and then you can just smack it with a hammer and it goes straight down in the bore. I don't have one here in the shop though. So we're going to find a socket that's the same diameter as that bearing now, because we're flush with the outside edge of the hub here. So we're going to put a socket on top of here, and then I can smack the socket to drive this in. So when I put this on, you can see it's touching the outer race, but not the black grease seal. So it's on the outer race. And you can hear the sound changed when it bottomed out, so it's got nowhere else to go. So we know that it's in all the way. So we're going to take our new seal. And I find seals a little bit trickier to get in than the bearings. The bearings are pretty rigid. The seals, when you smack them on one side, they can tip up on the other side. Well, this one's going okay. And same thing, you can get seal drivers to get these in nice and straight and flush. And flush is all we're after. The edge of the seal is just going to be even with the edge of the hub. So that's one bearing down. Pretty easy. So then we're going to take our tube. You can clean this up, which is something I should need to do right now. So I'll just give this a shot of brake clean here. And it doesn't need to be spotlessly clean, just getting the big chunks off of it and the rust. So you can see how much water was in here at one point. All right, with that clean, I'm going to drop that in. And now when we press our next bearing in, it's going to bottom out on that guy. And that's our guy there. And same thing, another socket here that's just the right size. So when you drive this bearing in, it's landing on that crush sleeve. So it is putting pressure on this outside race. So if you drive this, keep driving this, once the inner race hits that crush sleeve, you're side loading all the bearings, which as I mentioned before is less than ideal. So try and avoid that. And then we've got our sprocket carrier. So there's a sleeve inside of the bearing here. You can see where all the dirt is here. That sleeve is not part of the bearing. It's an add-on. So we're going to set this on the ground. We're going to knock that one out. And again, you can find a socket that's the right size, or, yeah, that one's not very tight. So that was a very light tap. And clean all the disgusting stuff out of here. So depending on where you live, you might only get a half a season out of wheel bearings on your adventure bike. The amount of mud and silt and things that you ride in is gonna affect that. If you ride in the desert, you may be able to get multiple seasons out of a set of bearings. A bit of a pain in the ass. I'll get the seal here. So you can see how much rust is in here. This bike literally has 5,000 kilometers on it, and that's just kind of the terrain that we have here in the climate. We get the gross muddy silt that gets in everywhere, so bearings don't last. So obviously when you're doing this, the bearing is only going to come out till it's flush with this edge. So you need to do something to support this to allow the bearing to get pushed all the way out. You're not going to have or very unlikely you're going to have a socket big enough to get that one moving. Crunchy bearing number 3. So I don't have one big enough to drive this bearing in. I don't have a socket big enough. So I'm going to take the old bearing. I'm going to use it instead. And obviously we need to be careful we don't basically install this one. Kind of like that. I don't want to do that. You don't want to hit it in too deep, or else that one starts to be a pain to get out. So we're back to the chisel here on the outer race though. And you can have a look at the bottom. There's still a gap there, so we don't have it totally installed yet. And now it is totally installed. So if you get a bearing tool, that is definitely the best way to do that. Or a bearing driver, I should say. Then we're going to take our third seal and drop this one in. So you don't want to do seals with the chisel. You'll make a mess of them. They won't seal properly. And that is pretty much all we have to do here. We've got that weird spacer thing that drops in the middle here. And that's it. We're done. That's it for your rear wheel bearing change. I'm not going to put everything back together because we've got to change the tire still for this trip. That's all there is to it. Pretty quick and easy, actually. About half an hour to do the 3 bearings and seals on this. You do need some fairly large diameter sockets or a bearing and seal driver tool, which is actually the better way to do it rather than the hammer and sockets. You need a big punch and a seal removing tool, and of course your bearings and your seals. Pretty quick and easy though. So that is episode 1 of our DIY Back to Basic shop series. If you have any suggestions for videos that you want to see, you're like, hey dude, I want to know how to rivet a chain or whatever the case may be, just put it in the comments. We'll tackle it. I won't necessarily have all of the answers you need. I'm not a bike mechanic, but I get around fairly well in the shop, but certainly you can find the answers to your questions. And yeah, we'll do a whole series of different DIY back to basic kind of videos. So if you have any questions, info@camel-adv.com. Thanks for watching.